asked to kind of compare the Podgo with the NUX MG30. Now, initially when someone asked me this, I kind of thought you probably kind of know my answer already. So you'll probably know that I'm a big fan of Line 6. I bought the Podgo with my own money because I was kind of excited about what it could do potentially, and it being like a new generation of the pod and being close to like the Helix stuff, using that same modelling but put into a different enclosure with more kind of geek-friendly buttons and stuff. There's lots of stuff on the channel with me using this. In that intro there, I was using the NUX MG30 on a matchless kind of amp setting, DC30, and the same on the Podgo with roughly similar settings and using the same kind of components, so you know, an AC30 cab and also like an MXR Distortion Plus up front into a spring reverb, just a really simple preset. I think you could probably get things to sound quite close, but that was just to give an idea of how things are trying to sound out of the box, if you like. So I think it would be fair to say this is a bit brighter, and this is a bit darker and a bit kind of thicker and fuller in the low end. On that particular sound, it could be completely different for other settings, but that's the point, I guess. You can make things sound, you've got all of the tools in each of these to make things sound pretty much how you want them to. You've got EQs, you've got drives, you've got high cuts and low cuts. So you should be able to get things fairly close to what you want. I would say the parameters that you can edit in the MG30 are going to be slightly more limited. On the reverbs within the Podgo, for instance, you have things like dwell, spring count, drip, low cut, high cut, mix, all that stuff. Things are generally a bit simpler in the MG30. Size-wise, you're a bit smaller with the MG30. For me, the main huge difference, so they're quite close in price. This is 380 quid-ish, and this is about 300. To me, the amount of buttons that you've got on here and the friendliness of this kind of gig view, so you can go between, with this mode button, snapshots or presets. So I've got 4 snapshots there. And then you can press mode and you can go into individual kind of blocks and turn on and off like drive, delay, reverb. So you not only can change the bypass states and the parameters within each of those blocks with snapshots, but you can actually go in and go into pedal board mode essentially and use things like a traditional pedal board. Really, really powerful for gigging. You don't really have that capability with the MG30. You can change bypass states, but that for me is the major difference between these two. Also, you've got all of the kind of depth of the Helix kind of effects stuff, so you've got most of that stuff in there. So in terms of variety and choice, you get quite a bit more in the Podgo. So that for me is why I think I would choose the Podgo, but I'm going to go in now deep dive into the MG30 and show you what I like about it anyway. And for 300 quid, I think it's pretty cool, and it might be an option for some folks who are interested in this sort of thing. And I think it's fair to say that this is one of the more unique devices in terms of your user experience and seeing like a representation of the pedal on the screen as you edit stuff. It is quite unique and quite a nice user interface to use, so I'll show you that now. Cheers. So as I say, I was asked which would I buy, a Podgo or a NUX MG30. I've actually done that in real life. I bought a Line 6 Podgo because I was interested in it and wanted to try it out. NUX actually sent me the MG30, so aside from that, the real world test is that I would probably buy the Podgo. And for gigging, I think the Podgo, the setup with snapshots and the amount of foot switches and the ability to switch between stomp mode and snapshot mode beats the NUX quite easily. You'll see now on the NUX, this is new since I last used one, you've got this scenes mode where you can bypass blocks and turn blocks on with that, so that's kind of more useful. So you know, if you were gigging, you could have this clean tone, bring in delay, and then you could kick on a drive. That's actually quite cool, and it's been quite fun to play with this now, because you know, typically in the Helix world, Podgo world, I live in snapshot mode. That's what I do. So I don't go switching between presets because you lose your kind of reverb tails and delays. So using this in scene mode is actually more familiar to what I would do. But let me just show you some things that if you go up here, press up, you can move any of the blocks to anywhere in the chain. So that's neat. So on certain effects like the mod or the delay, you can also set them to be parallel or series. You know, reverb, you can also do that, I think, if you press in knob 4. Right, like that. Anyway, yeah, I'm not exactly sure how that works, the parallel routing. I can't hear it making a massive difference. So here you see this is where you can set your foot switch assignment. Again, this is, I think, a little bit less refined than something like the Podgo. But here 4 is where you can set your control switch to do different things. So you could set it to be most obviously something like a tap, or for me, I use it to be a scene controller, so you can switch between scenes, as shown earlier. Other things that I really like about it, so if we go into the reverb block, we've now got this new kind of damp setting, which I guess is going to be based on like a Nunabur. Just a beautiful reverb, really. So that's something that I really like. And the other thing that I just found yesterday was actually the wide range of mods that you've got here. So we got like a CE1, CE2, stereo chorus, vibrato with an interesting name, detune, flanger, phase 90, phase 100, and then this is really cool. So this is kind of Eric Johnson's chorus of choice, and I was messing around with this yesterday. So press 2 to get subdivisions as well. So here's this. And again, you could move this block around. If you go up here, move it post delay, and you know, put on the delay. So really nice ambient tones, which I wasn't necessarily expecting to be digging as much as I am. If we press this down button again, you can change the wah pedal to be doing other things. So if you like go here, you could set it to be gain, mod, delay, aspects of the reverb, and so on. And then 2 and 3 would be different foot switches that you can plug in as well, I think. Other things that I like, if you go into the compressor, you can change that to be other things. So if you go to the compressor and then hold this button in, you can change it to be another drive pedal. Hold it in again, switch back. And likewise with the effects pedal, you can change that to be another mod pedal, or with this mod pedal over here, you change that to be another drive pedal, if that makes sense. So that's useful. The other thing that I wanted to show you was that you have a really interesting selection of drives. So got like an distortion plus, so that's fairly typical. The RC boost, AC boost, distortion ones like a DS1, tube screamer, blues driver, morning drive, so the GHS like blues breaker type, a rat, a Keeley red dirt, this crunch, I'm not sure what that is, but one fuzz pedal here, Boss Katana. This one, the Steel Singer, which is actually a clone of a Free the Tone, I think it's called a String Slinger or something like that. Quite an interesting selection of drives, not as kind of obvious as some other stuff. So an interesting selection of drives, just the one fuzz, so that's quite a big step down from the Podgo. The Podgo, you've got a big choice of fuzz pedals to choose from, probably like 10 or something like that. Choice of amps is interesting as well. So you've got, for instance, a Jazz Clean, Deluxe Reverb, Bassman, Tweed Twin, Hiwatt, I think a Mark 1 Mesa Boogie, A15, AC15, a Vox AC30, a Plexi, a JTM 45, a JCM 800, I guess, Silver Jubilee type thing, or Jubilee, Soldano Slow, Friedman HBE, a dual rectifier, VH4. So a lot of overlap there. Now we start to get interesting, like a Vibra King Fender, a Buddha, a Dr. Z 38, a Super Reverb, a JTM 45, would that be? A Matchless DC30, Brit 2000, whatever that would be, a Bogner Uber, and then a couple of bass amps. So choices of amps, I think in some ways kind of interesting. So like this one I quite like the sound of as well. The Buddha as well. If you go in, you can see that some of these have different options. So like the VH4, I'm going to imagine, has a bias, and dual rectifier has a bias. Soldano will probably have a bias. Doesn't have a depth switch though. So just some interesting sounding stuff. Anyway, AC15 doesn't have a bias. On the Podgo, you could go in and you could alter your amp kind of parameters like sag and bias. But I don't necessarily often do that anyway. I think it'd be fair to say it has some of the similar limitations to the Podgo in terms of, you know, single amp chain and the number of blocks that you've got there. One nice thing about it is you've got a looper always available, so you could get in here. You could switch through the scenes here, I think. only slight negative about that is that you sometimes might find yourself switching presets like I just did there, trying to get to the looper. So that could happen sometimes. You've got the drum machine in there. You know, some of those sounds might be kind of okay for practicing, but I think that gives a fair kind of summary of my thoughts on the Podgo versus the NUX MG30. Myself, I think the Podgo would be the route that I'd go down, candidly, but doesn't mean there's lots of stuff in here which I kind of also dig, and they've done things in quite a different way to anyone else, really. There's not really anything that I can think of that looks quite like this, works quite like this. It's kind of quirky, and I kind of dig the tones quite a bit, I think. So, you know, maybe worth having a look at. You've got an octave here as well. You've got an octave shift up or down with the wah. And then I noticed yesterday that in the mod effects, you've also got at the end a harmony thing. That doesn't necessarily work super well for like more than one note at a time. You know, you get quite a lot of glitches, but for single note stuff, it works perfectly fine. So maybe worth a look. You've got a pre-EQ, so you could kind of shape your guitar tone going in. You've got an output mode doing the same sort of stuff, and you've got a gain useful. Alright, so maybe worth a look. Cheers!